So today's topic, adding sublimation to an embroidery business. My name is Jimmy Lamb with Sawgrass Technologies, and I'll be the host for this event. So my first question to you, are you leaving money on the table? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you're not really taking all the money that you can possibly get out of each and every one of your clients. Now, I don't mean stealing from them, obviously, but I'm just talking about they have a lot of needs that you may not be servicing. Diversification, powerful word, but that is really the key to making money in this industry. When I started out as an embroiderer many years ago, you pretty much were a specialist. You did one or the other, embroidery or screen printing. I mean, that was the majority. There was a few other things out there. We did have heat transfers and letters and number applications and things like that. But for the most part, most of our decoration was screen printing or embroidery. And most people were specialists, and that worked pretty well. But things have changed. Our society have changed. Our customers' thinking have changed. And more customers are looking for that one-stop type of shop. Now, it doesn't make sense to have every form of decoration. It's just too costly and too complicated. But certainly, if you're focused on one of the primary forms of decoration, such as embroidery, you got a great product, but you also got a lot of limitations because there's a lot of other things that your customers need besides a stitched-on logo. And they're going to leave you to go get those things from other people, which means they're spending money with those people that could have been spent with you. And that's what we mean by leaving money on the table. So chances are, if you're an embroiderer, you're already covering a lot of good markets out there. For example, schools and sports. Lots of opportunities there for apparel and staff shirts, those types of things, spirit products and whatnot. And that's great. But you know what? Schools have a lot of things they need beyond apparel. If you look a little bit closer to your school marketplace, you're going to see that those particular clients are buying all kinds of other things, such as awards and plaques, team mementos, printed items, something you really can't do with an embroidery machine, ID products, all kinds of fundraiser items, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things that schools are buying that can be done with something such as sublimation, but cannot be done with embroidery. Same thing with the corporate and small business world. A lot of things there that are embroidered, so you definitely have some opportunities there as an embroiderer. And believe me, when we're talking about sublimation, sublimation is not meant to replace embroidery by any means. It simply complements what it is that you're already doing and allows you to get a little bit more money in the door. Because when you take a look at what the corporate businesses are buying beyond apparel, there's all kinds of other things out there, like promotional products that they invest a lot of money into. And then, of course, the plaques and awards and signage and all these different types of things, all that can be done with sublimation. In fact, everything that you see on that picture was done with sublimation. And then we have to give some personalization. I know from being an embroiderer that we did a certain number of retail-type personalized products. When we talked about monogramming and personalization with embroidery, it's pretty much like it sounds. We'd put some letters, 3 letters on a towel or shirt cuffs or whatnot. And we may go a little bit deeper and put a stock design in with some things. And certainly you can make some pretty good money out of that, because I did learn through some of the personalization that we did with embroidery just how lucrative that aspect can be, because it is a customized product made for a specific person. But you can get way beyond that with sublimation, because one of the things that you really cannot do with embroidery, obviously, is reproduce a photograph. Yes, I've digitized a face before, but it's not the same thing, okay? So when we start looking at the apparel aspect, sure, you can do that with embroidery, but what about all the other neat stuff? And let me tell you, one of the hottest things out there right now is the iPhone cover. Personalized, traditionally with pictures and some text or whatnot, but a lot of times a picture says it all. And people are paying top dollar for that, yet it costs a fraction of the cost of embroidery to be able to actually put in a photograph in a pretty large scale area. You'll see all that as we go through. So, keep these things in mind, that expanding into something like sublimation certainly expands your reach of what you're doing. Now, obviously, you probably already know with embroidery that you do have some limitations. Okay, sorry, but you do. I know this. The fabric texture can affect the sewing quality, for example. You have to be able to hoop or frame the garment. If you can't get it on the machine. There are some interesting ways to do it besides a pure hoop, as probably most of us know. The needle has to completely penetrate the fabric each and every time. So again, it has to go through and come back up. There's a lengthy setup process for artwork and digitizing. Keyboard lettering is pretty simple, but digitizing, different story. And it's typically limited to small designs, chest and cap. and that's a big limitation right there. The colors are limited to the number of needles on the machine. So if you have a 15 needle machine, you don't want to do any images that have more than 15 colors. Can be, don't want to do it. Fine details and small letters are difficult, if not impossible to produce. And charges are generally calculated based on stitches in the design, which I can talk for hours on that, okay, because I learned pretty quick not to do stitch count pricing for what I was doing. But that just makes it complex is what I'm getting at, because every job actually, the length of time required to do the jobs based on the number of stitches. I certainly understand that, but that's no way to be generating pricing, okay? So that becomes a really difficult aspect of embroidery. Now, if you start looking at sublimation, some of the characteristics you find with sublimation, you're going to find it has low startup cost, number one. You can buy several sublimation systems for what the cost of a single head embroidery machine is. It will not fade when laundered. It's embedded in the surface instead of being on top. A lot of printing processes, ink is placed on the top, and that is why it starts to crack and peel over time, whereas sublimation is actually embedded into the surface. That doesn't happen. It does not crack or peel, and of course it does not fade when laundered. The image size has little effect on production time, so it really has little effect on cost, which makes it a lot easier to do your pricing than when you're doing stitch counts, for example. Large area designs are very economical to produce. I mean, really, sublimation ink and paper averages about 0.01 cents per square inch. So if you do the math, an 8-inch by 10-inch image is really about 80 cents to produce, and it's actually less because I've rounded it up. Okay, but it's about 80 cents for an 8 by 10 full coverage design. Try that with embroidery. What's it going to cost you? So the reality is we can do some pretty big stuff for very, very cheap. There's no limit to the number of colors that can be printed within reason. I mean, everything has a limit, but when you're talking about thousands and thousands of colors, it feels like there is no real limit there. And sublimation works on many other items besides apparel. In fact, apparel is a very small part of what we do with sublimation. Quick setup and production times make it ideal for short runs. So if people need onesies and twosies, you can do it, okay? It's not like screen printing where you're going to spend hours setting it up. You can get it up and running pretty darn quick. So now when you think about the best of both worlds, if you look at this image here, it's just a great example of what customers buy. And if you're an embroiderer and that's all you do, then you can do this shirt here in the very back center that has embroidery on it, okay? You could do that and probably make a little bit of money. But, you know, what happens when these people want all this other stuff? I mean, how many of your customers are out there leaving you and going somewhere else to get all these things you see at the bottom? Now, obviously, this one back in the back right corner, that's either screen printer or DTG with white ink. But if you added sublimation, you can bring in all these things down here, and now you can do everything you see in this image but one. Now, I know a lot of you have considered direct-to-garment printing. Nothing wrong with direct-to-garment printing. I mean, the problem is it's limited to garments. That's the problem. This 8-inch by 10-inch graphic, which is provided courtesy of Great Dane Graphics to us, averages about 50 cents in cost to produce. But if you use the figure of 0.01 cents per square inch, it comes up to about 80 cents in cost. So, you know, some variations in different printers, and, you know, it can be a little bit of difference there, but it really doesn't make any difference. I mean, it's under $1 any way you cut it for an 8-inch by 10-inch, under $1. And it can print in about 30 seconds and then press in about 2 minutes. Well, 1 minute, but 2 minutes with your setup time there, okay? Try that with any embroidery machine. There's no way you can produce an 8-inch by 10-inch image in 2 minutes, even 3 minutes, even 5 minutes. Not going to happen. You know, here's a big other thing, too, for talking about sublimation versus embroidery is that image size. If you had a 3 by 5 image for embroidery at 7,500 stitches, it's going to take you about 10 minutes to run. Sublimation is going to take about 3 minutes. If you went to an 8 by 10 image that might have now 20,000 stitches, because it's got a lot of fills in there, embroidery can be 25 minutes. Sublimation is still about 3 minutes. You go to a 12 by 18, with embroidery you're talking about an hour, and sublimation took a little bit longer to print it out, so maybe we're up to 4 minutes. So, you know, that's where sublimation also starts to leave embroidery behind, because we can do large areas, and it really doesn't cost us much more to do it because the cost per square inch is just so low to be able to produce it.